My name is Jeremy with AGA. In this video we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of marksmanship. We're going to start with the stance, then we're going to move to the grip, then we're going to move to the presentation, sight alignment, sight picture, and trigger control. The more you know about handguns or rifles, you know that it's all about the fundamentals. You have to apply the fundamentals in order to build upon that. All right, the first one is the stance. I like to start from the ground up so I don't forget anything. There's three major stances out there: the modified, the weaver, and the isosceles. We'll be focusing on the isosceles today, as that's what I feel is the most consistent over the years. Right. The isosceles is pretty simple. If your target is squared up in front of you, you square up with it. You open up your feet shoulder width apart. Your dominant foot's a little further back. It's about 6 inches. You go half the distance, open up, slightly bend the knees. That puts your weight right at the balls of your feet. We don't want to be leaning forward, and we don't want to be leaning back. We want to have a nice, almost fighting stance. All right, this is not any other stance. This is not an ATM stance. This is not a racing stance. This is a shooting stance, just like this. And the stance is going to come important later on with the presentation of the gun. All right, pretty simple. You want to keep your hips behind the gun and your shoulders behind the gun to absorb the recoil naturally. And I lock out my arms. Some instructors will tell you not to do that, but I feel it's more consistent that way. Moving on to the grip. Anytime you're messing with a handgun or you're practicing with a handgun, whether it be at the shooting range or inside the house, you want to make sure that it's unloaded first. We do that by removing the source of ammunition. If you're right-handed, you always keep the gun in your right hand. If you're left-handed, you always keep the gun in your left hand. You do everything else with your non-dominant hand. So I've removed the source of ammunition, and I'm going to lock the slide back using the slide lock. Push it up, pull back. If there was anything in there, it would have been extracted by the extractor. You can see that on the outside. On the inside, it's a little tooth, grabs the back of the rim of the bullet and pulls it out. It's unloaded, so let's establish our grip. All right, it's important with the grip, you get your dominant hand, the V of your hand, as high as you can get it in the back of the gun. Some people call this the beaver tail, some people call this the dovetail. It doesn't really matter. Get the V of the hand as high as you can get it, with your finger off the trigger, straight and off the trigger. All 3 fingers below the trigger guard and touching. All right, we'll keep the right thumb up, out of the way for this grip, but for now we're going to focus on the back. Right, we don't want a gap back here. I see this a lot at the range, a lot during courses. The bigger the gap, the more room the muzzle has to flip up when we shoot it. All right, we want positive control of the gun and the recoil. The only way we can do that is by getting the V of the hand as high as we can in the back of the pistol, again with the finger off the trigger. When it comes to the supporting hand, there's a bunch of different ways to support the other hand and the gun. The teacup, you got this one, you got this one. The only one you really want to avoid when shooting a semi-automatic pistol is when you have a thumb on this side and you have a thumb on this side. All right, naturally when you pull the trigger on a semi-automatic, the slide will come back and it'll cut you right around the thumb. All right, so we want to avoid that at all costs. The grip that we're going to talk about today is a very simple one. It's very repeatable and it's very compromising. You have a gap here naturally as a right-handed person and a gap here. We want to cover that gap as much as we can and build as much friction with the gun as we can. Getting the palm in the gap, the thumb forward, and all 4 fingers below the trigger guard. Now we're using both thumbs to point the weapon forward. We're locking our arms out and we're supporting our other hand. With a light frame pistol, we can put our hand up here, our finger up here, but it's not recommended and it's not needed. All right, so all 4 fingers below the trigger guard, palm flat with our thumb forward. As a right-handed shooter, our right thumb will be on top of our left thumb. This is the common mistake with a lot of male shooters. Put the right thumb underneath their left thumb, creating a gap, and you're losing friction and support of the gun. That's why most male shooters will tend to shoot a little low to the left. All right, now we have the stance, we have the grip. Now we need the presentation of the gun. The presentation is very simple. A lot of guys will use the low ready. Some older men will use the high ready. What I'd like to see is right here in the middle of the chest. This is where we load the magazine. This is where we pull the slide back. This is where we present the gun from. So from the high chest, straight out. Notice I'm not moving my head, my hips, or anything else. That the stance has already been established. I've got my stance. Now I'm just presenting the gun, just bringing it right up between my eyes and the target. The common mistake here is people will be standing straight up. They'll push their butt out, push their head forward, push the gun forward all at the same time. It takes a lot of coordination and it takes a lot more time. So we're going to go from here. We have our stance already, bring it right up between our eyes and our target, locking those elbows out, and now we're ready for sight alignment. Now we're ready for sight alignment. We want to get the front sight in the middle of the 2 rear sights. More importantly, the top of the front sight nice and flush with the top of the two rear sights. It's easier seen here on the side. If our front sight is higher than the two rear sights, it's going to shoot high. If our front sight is lower than the two rear sights, it's going to shoot low. All right, so once we've established the front sight in the middle of the two rear sight notches, we have the top nice and flush with the top of the two rear sight notches, we want to put it on our target. And today our target is the X. We can either cut it in half or we can cover it up all the way. When most guns leave the factory, they want to know where the sights are the bullet will impact. That's a good gun in my book. So use the sights to your advantage and put it on what you want to shoot. All right, I see a lot of good groups right here during private lessons and CHL qualifications, and it's because they can see the X. 9 times out of 10, when I ask them, can you see the X when you're shooting, they'll say yes. That means their sights are below the X. You want to put your sights on the X. Right? We're not ready to pull the trigger just yet. We need what's called sight picture. Once we have it lined up, we have our stance, we have our grip, we have our sight alignment, we need is what's called sight picture. We need to stop focusing on the X and the target itself and bring our focus all the way back to that front sight and that front sight only. If we have this correctly, the front sight will appear clear as day and the target will now appear blurry. And now we're ready to pull the trigger. There are two types of shooting: shooting with both eyes open or one eye closed. If you're going to shoot with one eye closed, you need to make sure you're closing or opening the correct eye. A lot of people make this mistake. So finding your dominant eye is very easy. You're just going to make a diamond with your hand, outstretch it in front of you, arms locked out, both eyes open, head straight up and down. Put that X right in the middle or any object. You're going to close one eye. Then you're going to open that eye and close your other eye. Whatever eye kept that object in the center is your dominant eye. You want to close your non-dominant eye if you're going to shoot with one eye. Once you've identified your dominant eye, let's say I'm right-handed, left eye dominant, which is pretty common. After you do the dominant test, you'll probably find yourself, if I were right-handed, left eye dominant, I'd probably catch myself turning my head to the side with my head on my shoulder, lining up my left eye. What you can do when you're shooting a pistol is keeping your head straight up and down, having true focus, extending your arms and bringing the pistol over to your left eye, still maintaining your head straight up and down. The reason that I present the gun from my chest straight out is because it's a straight line. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. The military taught me 6 o'clock and come up, but in a self-defense scenario, if I rely on the low ready, someone can easily close the gap, which is 3 feet of a normal self-defense shooting, and keep that muzzle down. I will never be able to get it up. If I present from here down to here, I'm never on target from here to here, and someone can keep that muzzle up, and I'd be trying to force it down in order to protect myself. If someone reaches for the gun here, I can accurately shoot in front of me. Once we've established the stance, the grip, the sight alignment, the sight picture, we're ready for the trigger control. Sight picture is important before we master the trigger control. We want to get our meaty portion of the finger right here, not the tip and not the joint, right on the middle of the trigger. We want to pull back, we want to hold it, and we're not going to let go until we want to take our next shot. We'll feel the sear re-engage, we can pull again. All right, that's good trigger control. We need to follow through with our shot. It's like a baseball or like a football. We wouldn't stop here. We need to go all the way through our shot to ensure we're not jerking the trigger, we're not pulling the front sight down at the last second, and we're supporting the gun throughout the whole process. All right, so to reiterate, we have the stance, we have the grip, we have the sight alignment, we have the sight picture staring at the front sight, and the trigger control. If you can remember 2 things when you're out at the range, it's the front sight and the trigger control. What helps with that is if you really limit yourself to what you're thinking when you're shooting and say it inside your head, front sight, front sight, front sight, as you pull the trigger nice and slow. Again, my name is Jeremy with American Gun Association and On Target Austin. If you liked our video, you can check it out on Facebook or our website, gunassociation.org.